Hey all you addicts out there, welcome back to another addicted fishing tutorial. I'm Jordan Carnegie, and today we're sitting here on the river with you guys talking about summer steelhead, spring chinook, and the 5 best ways to go out and target any of these fish in the spring, summer, and early fall time. I have everything here next to me, guys. I'm going to show you everything I like to use. Basically, I'm not going to show you too much, but I'm going to show you everything that I like. All 5 of the best techniques to use to catch these fish in the summertime. So stay tuned. You guys are going to learn a ton today. Thanks for tuning in. So in the summertime when I go to the river, I pretty much only go with 2 rods, and I always go with those 2 rods, and if I leave one behind, I always regret it. So what I have for those 2 rods is usually 1 bait rod and 1 hardware rod, depending on what you're gonna throw on it. Really, I'd stick with these 2 even if you're fishing out of a boat. You might bring 1 extra one to run a plug rod or a diver rod or something like that you don't wanna set up a lot. But if I'm going to the river in the summer, I'm gonna have 1 spinner and 1 kind of bait. I feel like bait, more so than a winter steelhead, really comes into play a lot more in the summertime for the summer steelhead and the salmon species. I think a lot of times it is because the water's so much lower. The water's a lot warmer, so the fish are more aggressive, and you can really kind of key in on those natural feeding habits that they're staying in as they come in quickly from the ocean and catch them on bait or an aggressive hardware presentation. So the 5 best ways that I've found to target these fish is really a giant range, and I got them all sitting here next to me. I'm going to go through each one and kind of explain why I like to use it and where I like to use it. What I have for my rods, first off, this is a 9/9 6 to 12 pound rod, Guide Select Pro with a C40 Kymar. I like the C40 because it gives you a lot of line. If you're going to accidentally be hooking into salmon, depending on where you're fishing, you're going to want something with a little more line, or else you're not going to stand a chance of fighting them. On 12, 15 pound tests, they're going to spool you clear gone down the river. The rod I have next to it is the 9.2 8 to 17 pound spinner rod, and that's a beautiful rod because really it allows you to really target salmon and steelhead, and it really can withstand the fight of either one. It's light enough to have a lot of fun with a smaller summer steelhead, but it's heavy enough to get enough backbone against the big heavy, 15 to 20 pound chinook. So those are my 2 rods I go with, both with that C40 Kymar and the P-line braid, either the 40, 50, even down to the 30 pound with Teflon coated braided is what I like to run. If I'm going to be running a spinner rod, this one has the TCB on it, but you can go and use that darker green color when you're throwing those spinners. I like the high vis because I like to be able to see where my line's at. I almost always exclusively use a bumper when I'm fishing for salmon or steelhead, so that yellow line I don't feel like spooks those fish as much as if you were running it right to your weight. So that's what I like to use for my rods. Now we're going to dive into the good stuff, the business end. Really what I have sitting next to me here, I have spinners, I have some kind of shrimp or prawn, I have bait, eggs, some kind of cured eggs, I have jigs, and then I have my plugs. And really, other than fly fishing, there is kind of not as many more popular ways than this to fish for the summer steelhead or again the spring chinook. Some people use beads. I like to use quite a few beads, but it's not really the main one that we're going to talk about today. More so is like the hardware end that you see here. First off, I'm going to start with the bait. I find bait works a lot better in the summertime, even more so than the winter. A lot of us go just to those bead fishing setups in the wintertime for steelhead, and those work in the summer, but what ends up happening is you're missing out on a lot of aggressive bites with this kind of bait setup. These fish are in a smaller area, there's less water in the river, and when you do use bait, it gets that bait and that scent so compact and in their zone that they really can't help but hit it most times. So having some kind of coon shrimp, you can go and watch some other of our tutorials and see how to set all these setups up. I'm just going to talk about the business end of them. But having some kind of coon shrimp or prawn, whether you're tipping your jigs with it or you're running them naked just on a bare hook with a corky or a bead or by itself, can be one of the most effective and one of the quickest ways to get a fish. A lot of these are really very efficient presentations where it doesn't take you long to find out if there's a fish in that hole. So moving along from those coon shrimp, going to bait or roe. Roe works incredibly good in the summertime for just about everything. If you're fishing for salmon, you almost have to have it. If you're fishing for steelhead, you almost have to have it. But what differs those 2 baits from that in the summertime is going to be how you cure these eggs. For the summer steelhead, you go very plain. Sometimes you don't even cure them, you just borax some natural eggs. And why that is because we usually have clear water. You have a lot of sight fishing with these fish where they can see your gear a lot further away from them than they would any other time of year. So having a very lightly cured and a very naturally cured roe, even just a borax or a salted egg, works really, really well for the summer steelhead. And I find most of the time that I catch most of my steelhead when all my eggs wear off and I'm using just that white skein, getting that small, delicate, natural presentation that the fish can really key in on and relate to as they're swimming in the river as you drift it down to them. So if I'm going to be fishing for salmon, you're going to want to go a little bit more cure centric. You're going to want to use different cures, different colors, different scents, go to your gels and your krill and kind of play around with all your different scents to find what those fish are biting. I don't find that steelhead like a very hot egg, and what makes an egg hot is using some kind of sulfite, whether it's metabisulfite, so on and so forth down the line, which really spices those eggs up and gives them a salty presentation that kind of essentially pisses off the salmon. So moving along from the eggs, I go to the river with both of these. Keeping them cool is crucial. If you don't keep them cool, they go bad quickly. So be sure to take ice and a little bait cooler with you. What we have here next to us is probably the most popular for fishing for steelhead in the summertime or in general. I mean, it's probably one of the oldest school tricks in the book, and it's just fishing with jigs. Right here I have an arrow jig, which is a smaller kind of a shrimp presentation, and then I have your regular rabbit fur jig, or you can go with the straight marabou. I don't have any marabous with me right now, but you can go with any of the colors. All jig head colors, all jig head patterns, everything works, some better than others, but having a good selection of your favorite ones going to the river is crucial. These I'm almost exclusively always gonna tip with some kind of bait, whether it be these coon shrimp or whether it be just a raw prawn. I'll take a little baggie full of shrimp with me to the river, and I'll use each little piece of those as I'm going each day and be able to tip my jig and get that tasty and that smelly presentation down to the fish. Or you can be using a water soluble scent, can be just as good. But keeping some scent on those jigs, presenting them under a float, using some kind of a fixed float or a slide float, usually a pretty light presentation. And this is kind of like the presentation I'm going to start with. If I get to a spot and I'm going to start fishing, I'm going to go with these very light, very delicate, intricate jigs to where you can send them down to the fish, not spook anything out of the way, and still get a good bite and a good reaction on almost every cast. So the jigs are crucial to have. Be sure to have a multitude of colors. I like the reds, like the pinks, and I also like the natural colors. That fleshy color can work very well most times of the year, kind of imitating that skein of the eggs. So moving along from jigs, we're going to go into the plugs. And the plugs are something that's probably very underutilized by a lot of fishermen. Most people with a boat are probably more plug centric. That's what they're going to fish more if they have a drift boat or a sled where they can back these plugs down into the river. But what a lot of people overlook is casting these bad boys. Of course, they're very easy to snag. So buying a plug that doesn't have as big of a lip, going with a smaller presentation plug like this K10, or going over to these little wigglers. Of course, the Brad's wigglers really are kind of the best for this because you can go up and down in sizes and up and down in nose sizes and bill sizes so that you're not diving too deep in the hole and you're getting a good swing. But what you would do if you're casting these from the bank is do more of a swinging presentation on your gear rod. You'd be casting at 45 downriver, swinging it in almost like you're swinging a spinner or a fly. So having those plugs in the box, I don't use plugs a ton when I'm doing a lot of bank fishing, but what I do notice a lot of times I overlook it, and it's a very, very effective way to catch summer steelhead especially, and the spring chinook. So taking plugs, of course fishing plugs from the boat, or fishing them from the bank, just casting them is a very effective way to kind of sneak up on those fish and show them something they haven't seen in the hole all day long. Last but not least, you guys and gals, is just the plain hardware. If I'm going to the river by myself and I'm gonna go fish all day, I usually just throw spinners. And that's because I like the take, I like the style of the presentation, and they're very, very effective. This time of year, the fish don't have a lot of room to be in the river. So when you send a really aggressive, flashy presentation down in front of them, more so than just their aggressiveness to eat it, you're really just pissing them off by getting that spinner blade or that spoon flashing across their face. They don't have hands, their only way to stop it is to smack it. And so that's why I really stick with spinners. Any kind of hardware is my favorite in the summertime, more so than bait because it's sticky and messy, more so than jigs because it takes a long time to fish. It's a very good way to kind of cover a lot of water quickly and really get an effective presentation all the way down through a run when you're fishing big summer steelhead or spring Chinook rivers. So I got spoons, I got spinners. This is an R&B bullet blade. This is your normal number 4 blue fox. Another R&B, just a normal Old Faithful blue, and then a Northwest Extreme Outfitter. These are great because they're extremely heavy if you want to fish deep, really boily water. You get those spinners down to the bottom, rip them through. Each one of these kind of has its own attribute and its own way it works in certain kind of water. So having a good range of your style of spinner can be very effective as well. So that pretty much wraps it up for us today, guys. These are my top 5 things that I'm going to go to the river with. If I had to shove everything in my pocket, I'd be carrying this stuff right here. So if you guys liked what you saw today, be sure and comment below. Let us know what your favorite thing to throw for summer steelhead, or how you like to set it up. Maybe you got some quirky little trick that none of us know about. That would be great to learn and great to share out there. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure and be sure and share this out there so everybody can see it, and be sure to subscribe to this channel down below. Don't forget, because we got new stuff coming out every single day. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Stay fishy. We'll see you on the river.